What is up, everyone? Eric Brooker here. I am your host, and welcome to the Counsel Culture podcast. This is the Leadership and Culture podcast where real conversations lead to real transformation. This show exists for leaders who care about the craft, how they think, how they show up, and how they build teams that actually perform when it matters most. We are recording from my basement. Aptly, we call it Studio 9 here in Minneapolis. Before we get into it, a quick ask. If this show brings value, please do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, leave a 5-star rating and a written review, a short written review along with that 5-star rating. It helps others find us in an ever-growing world of podcasts. And on that matter, if someone comes to mind who needs this conversation, share it with them. That simple act helps this message reach more people. Thank you. Today's guest is my friend Marc Nudelberg, son of a former guest. I will let you back into that one. Again, my guest today, Marc Nudelberg, president of On the Ball, a leadership training and development firm rooted in elite performance, discipline, and real accountability. Marc's background spans high-level college coaching, entrepreneurial leadership, and building a family-run business that helps organizations sharpen execution, develop leaders, and get 1% better every single day. His perspective blends sports, sales, and leadership in a way that's practical, challenging, and refreshingly honest. This conversation goes deep into leadership under pressure, performance over time, and what it really means to earn trust and drive results. This show is dedicated to Marc's journey. This conversation is what we make it. This is Counsel Culture. All right, here we go. This is a first for the show. I'm actually really excited. We had your dad on the show a long time ago, Marc Nudelberg. Welcome to the show.
Eric, thank you for having me. And I wish that I could say this is like the first time I followed my dad, but it's pretty much my entire life I followed my dad. So I'm just used to it at this point.
Man, listen, you and I have got a lot in common. I chased my mom into the tech industry 25 years ago. She was in it for about 40. I've got my son who's about 10 feet that way, just starting his career. I think there's a lot of opportunity. We're going to jump into the family side of what you do, but we start the show the same way every week. What are you most grateful for today?
I am most grateful for my family. I have a extended family. I come from divorced parents. My wife comes from divorced parents. I'm divorced and got remarried. Family is work, and we've gone through tons of trials and tribulations, but I've never had a better experience and been more fulfilled in my family life than I am now. And it's the thing that brings me the majority of my joy.
Brothers from another mother, divorced, myself, my parents are divorced, everybody's remarried, my in-laws are divorced and remarried.
Right.
Uh, and I love family, but to your point, man, it is a lot of work. As we jump in, we did the intro. We try to keep the intro short because people want to hear from guys like you and not guys like me. Give us an intro to yourself and your work and your origin story, if you would.
Sure. So quick background on me. I grew up in South Florida. I'm a South Florida guy just by association. Went to school at Florida State. I am a Knoll. I do bleed garnet and gold, but that offered me an opportunity to get into college football coaching from the time that I was in undergrad all the way through what led to a 10-year career that took me all around the country, and at one point was at the University of Florida. So I've been on both sides of that rivalry and have love and appreciation for both schools. um, but grew up in an entrepreneurial family. And for people that were born to entrepreneurs, you know that you have a hard time just saying yes to things. You have a hard time being told what to do, and you have a hard time accepting the status quo. And so that did not feed me very well in either my football career or in my first stop after that, which was at ESPN in sales. And so that led me to building what we do now, which is a training and development company with my dad as the chairman of the board, myself as the president, my brother as the vice president. And it's been an unbelievable experience over the last 5 years building that.
It's interesting, man. I started this podcast. I was writing a book while I was still working for people. I had not started my entrepreneurial journey. Both my mom and my dad owned their own companies. I should say my parents. My stepmom was really the founder of the company that my dad ended up ultimately partnering with her on. But the entrepreneurial spirit is there. But I will tell you, man, with what a lot of people call the side hustle, which was a non-profitable podcast where I wanted to learn and grow as a leader, where I was writing a book that, you know, the drill, man, it doesn't make you a whole lot of money, if any. But I wanted to learn and grow as a husband, as a father, as a leader. And people that you work for take issues with that stuff.
It's unbelievable, man. And we live in a time now where it's really never been easier to make income and to find opportunity and to create opportunity. So, look, I grew up with friends who had career company parents, right? And worked 20 like I grew my college roommate, his dad was worked in the post office. His dad delivered mail and did it for 45 years and retired, and great dude. But like, I remember being 22 and looking at my buddy's dad being like, shoot me if that's what I'm doing at 50 or 55. Like, I had seen different. My brain had seen different. There had been pathways in my brain that were opened up because of me watching my father build businesses. And I just knew that that wasn't going to be the route for me. And I will tell you, I just got done doing a podcast with one of my brother's friends who's like 12 years younger than me. He started a clothing brand, is a very successful entrepreneur, and grew up with an entrepreneurial mom. And he, for himself at 22, when he got his first job, said, if by 28, I am not out on my own, I have no choice but to get out on my own. That is my cutoff date for how long I will allow myself to be in a company before I start my own thing. And a year prior to that, at 27, he jumped out and he's got a very successful business. And it's cool to hear those stories.
It's interesting, man. I had just interviewed the founder of Reebok, Joe Foster, and the CEO of the company that I was working for had a tough conversation with me around the time I was investing in the podcast and how do I reallocate that time to help generate more revenue for the business. And I was like, man, you should hope that other people on your team, other people that are working for your company are chasing down some of the most successful entrepreneurs, business leaders in the entire world to have hour-long conversations. And he was like, but when did you have the conversation? Actually, this will lead itself to a really great question. When did you have that conversation with the founder of Reebok? And I was like, whenever was most convenient for him
Right, right.
because he was the guy's a billionaire. I I can learn something that I'm probably going to transfer to what I'm doing, which actually lends itself to a really interesting question. I was saying this to somebody the other day. I recently said this to my son, who again is just adjacent to me in the other room. I don't think that entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, successful business people need to work more than 40 hours a week. I think there's this mindset of you got to put in your 50, 60, 70, 80 hours a week. My mindset historically has been I just need you to work 40 hours. And what I mean by that, and I want your take on this, what I mean by that is if you're going to get your dry cleaning or your haircut, or if you're on Instagram or Facebook or talking to your wife, that comes out of the 40 hours. But I think most people, if they put 40 hours a week of actual work in, we're all destined to success. I think the
Man,
problem
I'll
is
do you
we
one
get
better.
sidetracked. Go for it.
I'll do you one better because I've never thought it's been about time. I've always thought it's been about output. Right? And
Yes.
so this is the where I got this philosophy from was really from Nick Saban, because Nick Saban did not care how long you spent practicing something. He cared about how many times you practiced it. So in a period, to do a specific situation, he may script 12 plays. And if you could get through those 12 plays in 4 minutes, he'd move on to the next period. That period may have been scheduled to be 12 minutes, a minute, or 8 minutes. But if you could get it done in 4 minutes without any mistakes, getting it done the way it's supposed to be done and all of that, he'd say, great, let's move on to the next period then, because you did what you were supposed to do, how you were supposed to do it, when it was supposed to be done. And so I go the other way with it. And I always, particularly in sales, and you and I will align on this. In football, if you win a game, they count it in the win column. And if you lose a game, they count it in the lose column, in the loss column. Sales is the only performance-based sport where people don't count the L's. They're only
Yep.
counting revenue. They're only counting the yeses. And so for me, if I know we have a certain revenue number we want to hit, we want to sell a certain amount of a certain product, we want to do a certain thing, I know based on some laws of averages and what we look at in our data, we're going to have to do X amount of no's and an X amount of activity and an X amount to get to those yeses. Put them all in the columns. And so on a daily basis, I could have a number that I'm trying to get to in people's attention that I tried to get, and people that engaged with that attention, and people that I had conversations with. And if I can quantify that number for myself, I don't care if it takes me 15 minutes. Put 15 minutes in. If you hit your number in 15 minutes, great, be done. Do what you
I
want with the rest of the time.
I've got a client right now that doesn't have a CRM, and the only output they measure, the only thing they measure is how many quotes each member of their team is doing on a monthly basis. And I was like, there's so many more data points up to that that matter. How many calls is Mark making and how many calls is Eric making to lead to those number of quotes? Because if we can make Mark here, I'll use one for you. We'll get there in a bit. But if I can get Mark 1% better each month, he needs to do that many less quotes to hit his quota. Or if he keeps doing the same number of quotes, he's going to be 125% of his plan. But we're not capturing that kind of data right now.
And really, if you look at the quotes, it's a lagging indicator, right? So like,
Bingo.
and I got, again, something else that I pulled from my football career was our goal board in a game was broken up of goals that were leading indicators. We didn't
Yep.
put total points scored. That's a lagging indicator. The things we looked at were how many yards did we gain on first down? How many yards did we rush for per rush? How many yards did we complete per completion? All of these were leading indicators. What was our third down conversion percentage? What was it
Yeah.
broken up by distance? Because all of these were the actual things that would lead to red zone opportunities. And then when you're in the red zone, what's our field goal to touchdown ratio? What's our scoring ratio? These were all the things we paid attention to that go, here's how we get better, guys. Don't just score more. Don't just say we need to score more points. We actually need to have better second down distances. We actually need to convert more on third down. We actually need to catch the ball. Like, there were all of these other things that people don't pay attention to in sales. So for me, like you said, and I'll give you a great example in sales. I had a call with somebody today, right? They sent out 25 videos and they said to me, Mark, nobody watched the videos. And I said, great, you did the activity. Now let's look at how well you did that activity.
Yes.
Because the answer might not be to send more videos. The answer was actually, you're sending a video to people with no context around it. There's just a thumbnail showing up in somebody's inbox that says, Eric, I made a video for you. They don't know you and they don't know what the video is about. Let's give them a little bit of context. Let's say, hey, Eric, I love the last podcast episode that you put out, and I'd love to check out the video I made for you below and let me know if you've got time. Then they'll open the video, guys.
Yeah.
So a lot of leaders would have said, oh, you just need to do more. And I said, no, let's look at it because you might need to do better. And it turned out he needed to do better, not do more.
So we moved to Minnesota in 2012, and I was about 6 months into a sales role, and I hadn't closed the door. I had done nothing. And I had worked for this boss in the past. He moved me to Minnesota, really grateful for his mentorship and his friendship. And he called me one day, it was just after 5, and I ran downstairs into my office, and it was that call. I was pretty certain it was just time. He was gonna cut bait. I was expensive. He took a risk on me in that we didn't have an office in Minnesota at the time, and we're on video call. And I looked at him and I was like, "Hey, Keith, what's going on?" And he goes, "I just wanted to check in on you." Then I said, "Oh, I'm good, man. How are you?" He goes, "Hey, I want you to hear this, but I like really want you to hear it. You're doing all the right things. The metrics the metrics that I'm seeing suggest that you're doing all of the right things. You're putting the activity in, you're putting the motions in, you're saying the right things. You're just not getting to the finish line." And I was like, "Oh, here we go. He's gonna fire me." He goes, "I need you to just keep doing what you're doing. Because if
So
you
good.
continue to do what you're doing," and man, it was like a month later, I was blowing my quota out of the water because all those metrics, all that momentum, all of that activity started to take shape, which reminds me of another story back in '05. Kelly Colbert, the company policy was once you hit your quota, you can have the rest of the month off. That was the PTO policy. Like, you can't have PTO until you hit your quota, which has to be illegal. But I sandbagged December 1st, all of November. I sandbagged. I hit my quota and I stopped putting orders in. December 1st, I put in a bunch of orders and I was like, "Kelly, I will see you in January." But to your point, I had all the data points on my activity and I tracked my activity. So while she thinks I took the whole month off, I was at home making phone calls because I knew if I sat and did nothing for a month, I
You're
would
going to
have
have
some
nothing
price.
in a month.
I'd have nothing in January.
It's spot on, and I look like I read a Salesforce report that said 67% of sellers are expected to miss quota, 84% of sellers miss quota last year, and sellers report losing 70% of their time to non-selling activity. And the fact that those numbers exist, I think, is an indictment of organizations. I think it's an indictment of the profession itself in terms of the sales profession. And I asked my dad this question the other day on one of our podcasts. I said, "What's the state of sales?" And he said, "It's bad. It's just bad." And because you see what's out there on Instagram that's getting a ton of action in terms of what sales trainers say and
Yeah.
do. You hear the "let me handle 3 objections in 30 seconds," and you hear the 101 questions you need to ask in order to drive more revenue. You see all of these things, and none of those things are teaching the actual craft of sales, which is discipline to a behavior, which is genuine curiosity, which is giving without asking, and discipline and trust in the process and in the behaviors that the results will come if you stay disciplined. And nobody is teaching that. Everybody's teaching the quickest way to get there and the scripts that you need to say. And none of that is helping us be better as sellers, except for us,
I
of
had a
course.
conversation with a guy a handful of years ago. Chris was new to the organization. We had a call with a partner and we had an hour. And Chris, in his defense, had busted his butt to get that meeting. And he said, "Hey, I'm new. I need you to take the lead." And we get off the phone call about an hour later, and he calls me. And if he's listening, he will tell me I had no right to speak the way that I did. But he picked up the phone and he was like, "Eric, what the hell was that?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, We had an hour. I busted tail to get that meeting. We had an hour. And I was like, and he said, all we did was talk about Disneyland, dogs, and family. I said, Chris, what happened in the last 5 minutes of that meeting? And you could hear the light bulb go off. And he goes, he asked for another meeting. I said,
Bingo.
Chris, what is not taught today is the sale isn't going to happen. There are transactional sales. The sale isn't going to happen in this call. We're going to
Mhm.
build a relationship. People buy from people they like and trust. We're going to focus on the things that matter, which is not us selling him a widget. But that last 5 minutes of the meeting when he's like, man, I got a hard stop in 5 minutes. What's your schedule like next week? That's the first step in the sales process that so many of us miss. And I have a question for you.
Yes.
I think more people are missing it now than ever before because and I think private equity has something to do with this. I think
Yes.
investors have something to do with this. The need to succeed yesterday is higher than it's ever been. I'm 46. When I started 25 years ago, I had like a ramp of a year. The expectation was low, the bar was low. Put the activity and do the things, and you'll be successful. I got a buddy today that sent me a note. He was let go after 7 months because he hadn't hit his number yet. And I'm like, man, you'd almost gotten out of the starting blocks
Yep.
at month 7.
And so I think you're right on all of that. Part of it is private equity and the churn and burn, right? Like we're purchasing this company just to try to get it to a number so that we can turn around and flip it, which is not good
Yeah.
for anybody, right? It's not good for the employees. It's not good for the business itself. It's just not good practice in business. But I do think something that you're not touching on there, which I think is important, is you have a lot of leaders that have never sold. You have a lot of people that
Yes.
are making sales decisions and are in sales leadership positions that have actually never sold. And it's an interesting dynamic because for me as a football coach, I played football in high school, but I was never good enough to be a major college football player. I was coaching kids that were far more talented than I ever was, that were doing something that I had never done. And so I was always like, well, you don't have to do it to be able to coach it. I don't necessarily believe that in sales. I think in order to be a good sales leader, you do have to know what it's like to discipline yourself to not pitching somebody when they open the opportunity. You do have to discipline yourself to having that relationship driven conversation and there just not being opportunity there. You do have to be in the position of going through, and I like to call it kissing frog after frog after frog, investing in other people that are only transactional and saying no to those people, and know what all of that feels like to really be a good sales leader.
All right. So what you don't know, Mark, is you're going to come back on the show at some point in the not too distant future. I have like a line of questions that we haven't even touched
All
on
right,
yet.
let's
But
go.
I knew we talked about this in the pre-call. I was like, we're not going to address
There's no
any of
way.
this stuff. I, I, I agree with you, but have a follow-up question. You intrigued me. So I agree that to be a good sales leader, one has to have some sales background. Here's the caveat. I got into leadership. I think a lot of us got into leadership because we were really good at sales. And the company that we worked for wanted to keep us. So we got to promote him. So you go from AE to like senior AE and senior AE to sales manager to whatever to VP. I didn't have any leadership experience when someone put me in that spot. So talk to me about the salesperson in their first leadership role. What are some tools and candidly, what's some advice that you would give them to lead well?
So, couple things, right? And this is one of my favorite sayings from coaching. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So it is man you so think about the way you sold and the way you built relationships with the people you sold to. If you don't do that immediately with every single team member that you're responsible for, you're already dead. You can't help them
Yeah.
do anything. It's no different. So you're actually already really good at doing the thing you're being asked to do now. You're just doing it with a different audience, doing the exact same thing. Build rapport, get to know them, know what's important to them so that you can identify where their problems are. And when you identify where their problems are, which I think in sales, our problems come down to three things. It either comes down to what we're thinking, it comes down to our time management, or it comes down to our communication. Period. End of story. I don't think your problems show up in any other area than those three. Once you identify where those problems are, the only way you can actually help them solve the problem is by doing three things: removing an obstacle for them, providing a resource, which can only be either information or a tool or a person, or creating a challenge for them to grow. That's it, right? And the way I talk about creating a challenge for them to grow is like, say, okay, you're struggling with disciplining yourself to your activity, right? And I'm going to help you because you're just not calendaring it. It's not on your calendar. If it's not on your calendar, it's not going to get done. So we help you with your
Yes.
time management, and you build a system for yourself where you know exactly where you're going to focus on new outreach every single day. And you come back to me and we're still struggling with that, right? It's not in my my toolkit. It's not in my responsibility to actually jump in and do it for you now. It is actually my responsibility to push it back on you, to say you have the solution, you just got to do it. And that's your opportunity to grow. This is your challenge to overcome. I've given you all I can give you to do it. You have to do it now. And I talked to a good buddy of mine who coaches for the Dallas Cowboys, and he called one of the receivers out. I'm not going to drop names because I'm probably going to get in trouble for talking about what he did in the locker room. But he called out one of the receivers for his selfish behavior. And he said, "Look, you can catch a ton of balls and you can put up a ton of stats and you can catch a ton of touchdowns." He's like, "But this right here is not acceptable and is not going to help us win." And I told him, I said, "You didn't do anything wrong there. All you did was give him a chance to grow as a human being. You said, this is what you're doing. This is what the standard is. Let me help you reach this standard and let me help you close that gap." And as leaders, that is our responsibility. It's very hard to do. We want to be nice to people. We don't want to be the bad guy. We don't want to make people feel bad. We don't want to piss people off. But in reality, it's our obligation as a leader. So I know I said a lot there, but to simplify it for a new leader, make sure you have a relationship with your team. Focus on identifying where their problems are, and then don't do anything other than either remove an obstacle, provide a resource, or challenge them to grow.
We're going to talk about the bad guy in just a minute. I've got a question on that topic, but you just brought something up that we can't gloss over. Have a relationship with the people. I talk about on stages, I talk about in my next book about the importance of relationship capital. So many one on one meetings are KPIs and metrics driven. I had done a keynote maybe 6 months ago, and I had one of the leaders reach out to me shortly after that keynote and say, "Hey, I've got all of my one-on-ones are tomorrow, but I don't have anything to talk to them about. Can I skip my one-on-ones?" And I said, "A absolutely not." I said, "You live in the same city." I said, "I want you to post up at Starbucks because you normally host these in your office. I want you to post up at Starbucks, and I want you to have them meet you at Starbucks. And I want you to talk about their weekend, what their plans are, ask what's going well at work, what's going well at home, what can be going better at work, what can be going." I said, "You have nothing but an opportunity to build relationship with them, because there's things I talk about this all the time. We're all going through something. For some people, it's a pregnancy. For others, it's a miscarriage. Someone's foreclosing on their home. Someone's buying their first home. And there are so many things that we can do with that information. But so many of the leaders are so focused on KPIs and metrics and TPS reports that they miss the opportunity to build a relationship. And that, I think, is a part of the employment problem that we have right now. People which is where the question is going. People are jumping ship faster than ever before because I think we as leaders are focused on the task at hand, not the person in front of us. With that being said, it's December 2nd. I don't normally date these. It's December 2nd. Lane Kiffin announced that he was departing his role, 2 days ago.
Mhm.
Everybody that is anybody seems to be giving him flack. I have an opinion on this, but I want your take. Lane Kiffin going to LSU. What do you think?
This is not a Lane Kiffin problem. This is an NCAA problem, right? Like, if you look at what Lane Kiffin did, and you can say, oh, he's done this all the time. He's actually never done this before because he's never actually turned a successful program around. He's never
Yep.
actually gone in and built a champion. He's actually been fired. He's taken a job and left for another job that isn't going well. So people are relating this to his previous career.
Good
This is
point.
different than it's ever been, right? And so thing I people are not paying attention to is that LSU is a dream job. It is
Yes.
every resource. It is the history. It is the pageantry. It is the fan base. It is the Tiger itself. I mean, there are ample reasons that everybody in college football would want to coach at LSU at some time. So to blame a man who has an opportunity in front of him for taking that opportunity, what are we doing this for then? If it's not to create opportunity and continue to grow and accept the next challenge and reach a little bit higher, what are we doing? Now, there is a problem. He screwed Ole Miss. He screwed the kids at Ole Miss, right? And what a shame it is for them to have to go through this postseason. But who allowed that to happen?
Yes.
NCAA did, right? The NCAA is still operating like it's 1985. Like, this is all about scholarships and the opportunity to be there, and college coaches are building young men. No, it's not. This is a business, and it's been
Yeah.
operating like a business for decades now. And they have continued to put their head in the sand and try to put little band-aids over all these little cuts, right? Little
But if
solution. Ooh, go ahead.
Yeah, but if we're letting kids enter the transfer portal, and if we've got this big decision day where high schoolers are announcing their intentions, then if I'm Lane Kiffin, the NCAA has created a reason for me to leave mid-season so I can take advantage of the transfer portal, so I can go hit up some of these high school kids, so I can build the best team as possible on year one. The other thing is he got a 33% pay increase. I don't know anybody listening to this that does not own their own business that would not take a 33% pay increase with any competitor.
So forget about all the problems that exist in the NCAA. If they focused on one, which is the broken schedule, right? The fact that they have signing day in 2 days, the fact
Yep,
that the transfer portal closes in February, the fact that coaches are allowed to be hired in the middle of a season, the fact that all of this is allowed to happen is simply a scheduling issue. If they just said, hey, look, once the season starts in August, no player can transfer, no high school player can sign, nothing can happen until February of the following year, you'd have no problem. Lane
yep.
Kiffin wouldn't be able to take the LSU job. Players wouldn't be able to enter a transfer portal. You wouldn't have to sign a recruiting class right now. You wouldn't have to do any of those things. Lane Kiffin would still be at Ole Miss. That staff would still be there. They would go through their championship run, and wherever it ended, it would end. He would leave. He would go take the LSU job. Everybody would say whatever they wanted to say about it, but we wouldn't have the issue we had now. This is strictly a scheduling issue caused by the fact that the NCAA has refused to look themselves in the mirror for 40 years.
Think they like the drama. Two two final questions. Again, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'd love to have you back on the show because I feel like
Love the
we've
comeback.
covered very little of what we had talked about. But you talk publicly about your father and your brother being really central to your journey in your book. They both write in your book. I believe, if I remember correctly, your grandfather wrote the foreword both in your coaching years and now in On the Ball Ventures. How did their presence and influence shape the way you wrote the book and some of the leadership principles that you highlight in your work today?
Number one, I wouldn't have written the book if it wasn't for my dad, because he pushed me to do that at that time. He said, "Look, I can just tell you that this point is a pivotal point in your life, and you're going to want to capture it. You're going to want to put it into words so that you can go back to it." Um, Number two, because of our family situation that we dealt with when my brother was little, I was thrust into a leadership role in our family, which I would not be the person I was if it wasn't for that experience and our bond. And I consider my grandfather the patriarch of all of it. I remember so vividly being a young kid and visiting him in his shoe store and watching him deal with his clientele and his customers and seeing the way he was dressed and knowing what it felt like to walk into a women's designer shoe store and feel like it was like the place to be. And that experience that he created and watching him deal with people were all just lessons that were taught through osmosis, right? It wasn't like he sat me down and was like, "Hey, these are the foundations of who we are as people." He just did it. And I saw the results of that from the way people reacted to him and resonated with him, that I was like, that's cool. I want to be like that. And so we have this, kind of energy that all of us possess that has been passed down from generation to generation, that it's just impossible to not acknowledge that as such a important part of my identity, my life, and what's helped me be successful.
As we shift gears, as we start to wrap up the show, you put these words, I almost took them right out of my mouth and put them in your book. This idea of getting 1% better every day. I learned this from a buddy of mine about 25 years ago, Eric Benson. But what does 1% better look like in real daily behavior? Not theory, but what are some of the actual things that we can do to implement that philosophy?
It's actually mental, right? It's actually waking up and recognizing that you have an opportunity to grow today. And that opportunity for growth is going to involve discomfort and
Yes.
is going to involve work that you don't feel like or want to do. And it's a choice to either act on it or avoid it. And if you avoid it, you will not stay the same. You will actually regress because of that. But if you act on it, you might not actually get better. You might make a mistake. You might actually stumble. It might actually create more problems for you to solve. But that action compounded over time creates significant growth. And so I think people take, "Oh, I'm here to get 1% better every day," and think you're actually going to get 1% better every day. It's just the act of accepting the challenge to get 1% better, and whatever happens, doing it again the next day.
All right, nearly the final question. You've done a lot of media. In fact, you mentioned earlier that you did a podcast already once today.
Yes.
You've answered a lot of the same questions that I'm sure you're normally asked. What's one question you wish people would ask you, but they don't?
What am I most fearful of?
And how would you answer that?
Missed opportunity. That
Talk to me about that.
So I've been fortunate to take advantage of almost every opportunity that's been presented to me. And some of the and like I love when people say, "Oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky to have coached at all of these places. You're so lucky to be in a family business." Those were not luck. That was timing, meeting, preparation. That was me doing the work every single day to try to get better, to learn, to develop relationships, to do all those things. And the fear of mine is that an opportunity will present itself and I won't take advantage of it. I won't be in a position to take advantage of it. I won't be in the right mindset to take advantage of it. I won't recognize it. Um, and that is scary because our life is a accumulation of the opportunities we've been presented and taken advantage of, and not all of them look alike and not all of them bring the same things, but the more you take advantage of, the more you get. And so my ultimate fear is that I will waste opportunity and that will waste potential. And then I think that leads to regret.
Man, I can't think of a better way to end the show. We are going to have you back. In the meantime, and this will be in the show notes as well. But where can people find you? Where can people find your work?
The best place to connect with me is on LinkedIn. That is I love that place more than anything in the world, but I am on Instagram at Coach Noodle. I'm rarely on Facebook. So your two best places to get me are on Instagram and on LinkedIn for social media. My email is marc at ontheball.co. If you try to sell me in your email pitch, I will not respond. If you show up with some personal information and nothing other than an ask for time, I am glad to grant that. So I'm not hard to get to. I'm not hard to find, as Coach Sanders loves to say all the time. And I'm always willing to spend some time with somebody who wants a conversation.
I love it. Mark, it was an absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate you very much.